Hello, everybody, and welcome back to part 8 of what if Warp for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron characters were in TF Prime. Now, let's not waste any more time. We start our story with Megatron at the bridge, when Arachnid comes in and says she's discovered a mysterious signal, so she'll go and get it. After she leaves, Megatron talks to Soundwave about how she'll need to be dealt with, so he calls Dreadwing to deal with her. With Dreadwing goes off and gets Demolisher, and they join Arachnid on the mission. They head to the location, but Arachnid figures out the plan and what they're gonna do. So she would say to Demolisher, "It's a surprise that you came along, after all, given that your partner Blackout didn't do so well." Demolisher is pissed and tells her not to disrespect him, but she keeps at it, which enrages him, so he attacks. Arachnid fights the two, with him going basically the same as in canon, except it's Demolisher that dies instead of Breakdown here, with Mech finding Demolisher's remains. Slipstream would arrive later and free Dreadwing from the tree, though. Arachnid walks through a cave injured, but she would run into something she didn't expect, an Insecticon scout, with it helping her out. After it helps heal her, she follows it deeper into the cavern, where she finds hundreds of Insecticons in stasis pods. She gets an idea, and so she sends a message to Megs to come to her. When Megs arrives, he is about to attack, saying she'll do no more killing of his soldiers. But she sicks the Insecticon on him, with the fight being very brutal, with Megs getting tossed around, beaten, and scratched up. But Megs does eventually get the win. But Arachnid has another plan, so she sends a signal out, awakening a few members of the hive as they fly in, and they start to attack Megs, with him getting beaten down as he can't fight all of them at once, especially after being injured. That is until shots are fired when Slipstream, Skywarp, Dreadwing, and several other cons arrive. They help Megs get up, and Megs orders for them to attack. As they fly out, Megs is impressed by their defiance, so he makes Dreadwing and Slipstream his two first lieutenants of the Seekers. Skywarp is a little pissed because he was sidelined, but keeps quiet about it. Arachnid would still escape with some of the members of her hive that she awoke, and they return to the cavern. She looks at them and says that they shall be her warriors, and now she will awaken the rest, but they shall lead them. However, one of these Insecticons steps out, and he is Hardshell, who pledges his allegiance to her, with Arachnid smiling as she says now they will wait for the right moment to strike. At the Nemesis, Skywarp is walking around when he is pulled to the side by Starscream, with them beginning to talk about recent events, and how Megatron simply sidelined him and put Slipstream and Dreadwing above him. But Starscream says that if he was leader, Skywarp would, but Skywarp cuts him off, saying Megatron is his leader, and that after what Thundercracker did, he won't be going and betraying Megatron. Starscream says very well, and Skywarp says he won't tell Megatron about this, but if he's planning something to keep him out of it, as he is not loyal to him anymore. Skywarp would leave the room, with Starscream heading back into another part of the room, where Dead End, Dragstrip, Knockout, and Breakdown are. With Starscream saying that Skywarp is clearly too stupid to see reason, so it looks like it's just them. Knockout then says that maybe this wasn't such a good idea to go against Megatron, but Dead End says Megs is going off the deep end. I mean, he's threatening to kill us a lot more than he usually does. Starscream agrees, and says that with Thundercracker, Blackout, and now Demolisher gone, that brings their odds back up a lot, as now 3 of the most heavy hitters of the cons are gone. Dragstrip does say though now Dreadwing is around, but Starscream says they can deal with him, as they must remember they do have control of a very powerful artifact, with him looking at the force field generator. And Starscream says, and now we wait. One night, Fowler is driving down the road when he is attacked by a black semi-truck, with him believing it's Optimus, so he calls in for backup. RC, Jazz, Bokeh Bombi, and Sideswipe come to the rescue, with RC and Sideswipe going after the truck, while the others save Fowler, with it going a lot easier. RC would still get run over by the truck, but Sideswipe shoots at it, but then he hears a noise behind him and is knocked out by a sound attack. The two would wake up at the Ark, confused, with Sideswipe saying he hasn't faced an attack like that since Soundwave jumped him and his brother at Paxis. That's when Optimus returns. Everybody is still suspicious, but they eventually believe him. Then they get a message from a military base that's being under attack. But when the bots arrive, they are shocked to see a black Optimus, a black Soundwave, with a golden laser beak attacking the humans. The bots try to fight them, but these drones retreat. As military then arrives, it mistakes the Autobots for the attackers, so attack them. Valor would try to clear their name, but to no luck. So until further notice, they're under lockdown. Springer does ask who could be behind this, but Optimus concludes it to be Mech. Optimus decides that because of this, they will sneak out of the base and begin looking for Mech, using their vehicles as disguise. However, the aerial bots, Jetfire, Springer, and the Autotroopers, and Grimlock as well, have to stay behind for having too obvious vehicle modes that the humans would see, and it would make it just a lot harder to hide. Silas is looking over the footage of the military attack, and he is happy as he turns to the returning Nemesis Prime, Buzzsaw, and Sound Blaster, as Silas now waits for the bot's next move. However, Sound Blaster's eyes begin to glow as he looks around, but goes back into place. With Silas seeing, and he is a little suspicious, but he doesn't do anything as their sensors detect the bots arriving. Optimus, Bombi, Jazz, RC, Bulkhead, Wheeljack, Sideswipe, and Perceptor arrive, with them splitting up, so Silas sends the drones after them. Bombi runs to the Nemesis Prime, with that going the same, leading to him getting taken down. However, Sideswipe would run into Sound Blaster, and says that if he's trying to trick him, it won't work, especially when you're using the body of a con. He manages to fight back pretty well against Sound Blaster, even scratching the Decepticon logo off of him, but he would be taken down by one of Sound Blaster's sound waves. RC would still go down pretty much the same, but she does get a few extra good scratches on them, but they still take her down. Jazz manages to last the longest, actually temporarily knocking Nemesis Prime down, but before he can take him out, he is hit by one of Sound Blaster's sound waves, causing him to be knocked out. Bulkhead goes down, but does some more serious damage to Nemesis Prime. Wheeljack holds his own on Sound Blaster, but Buzzsaw would shoot at him, causing him to get shocked and taking him down for the moment. Perceptor goes down the easiest. Soon, Optimus would run into the drones, with Silas speaking to him about how this will be his final fight. But he doesn't listen, and so fights against them. However, trying to deal with all three of them at once is a hassle. That is until a ground bridge opens, and Springer and Jetfire are sent in, with them aiding. Springer manages to slash Buzzsaw's wings, causing him to crash, but he is subdued by Nemesis, with Optimus jumping in to deal with Nemesis Prime. At that moment, Jetfire does lure Sound Blaster to the top of the silo. Optimus chases Nemesis up as well, and he does manage to kick Sound Blaster off, causing him to crash to the ground and seemingly go offline. Nemesis takes the chance to stab Prime, and Jetfire jumps in, but he has his wing cut off, causing him to crash down off the silo. But Silas would get interrupted by Fowler arriving in, with them fighting like the same as in canon. However, Silas realizes he's being played, but Prime takes the moment to take down Nemesis Prime. However, Grimlock then busts into the silo and grabs Fowler, and destroying the control computer, which allows Optimus to drop Nemesis down without any risk of killing Fowler. And so Silas is crushed down there by Nemesis's body. However, Optimus then jumps down, and he starts ripping the Nemesis body apart, leaving it nothing but a pile of junk and scrap. Optimus thanks Grimlock for saving Fowler, but then they notice the helicopters arriving, so Fowler stays, saying he could take it from here. So, the Autobots return to base. Everyone is repaired, with them trying to get over what just happened, but then Fowler comes in and says that Mech got away. But they did get the Nemesis Prime body. However, that Soundwave knockoff and Laserbeak knockoff, however, were nowhere to be seen. With them wondering how that's possible, because without Mech having a control device, there was no way they could have gotten them out of there in time. At another mech base, Mech is operating on Silas, who is hooked up to Demolisher's body. However, Sound Blaster and Buzzsaw are nowhere to be seen, but then we see Sound Blaster walking around a desert, holding Buzzsaw in his arms as he begins to repair his wing. He then stops and stares at a puddle of water, seeing his own reflection, and he starts having memories of Soundwave, and then his time in the testing lab being created, coming right back to him. He then looks down to his scratched Decepticon logo, before saying he will have his revenge on Shockwave and Soundwave for doing this to him. The episode goes the exact same, just Fowler mentioned some things that have changed, and some other events like the bot's arrival and stuff, and how the other two mech drones are missing. On the Nemesis, Megatron orders Starscream, Skywarp, and Soundwave to report on the decoding of the next Arachnid relics, with them saying it will take some time, but it will be completed soon. However, Megatron, when he turns his back, he sees a missile go flying right past him, and when he turns, he sees Starscream, who Skywarp had pushed, causing the missile to miss Megs. Megatron is angered, but Starscream goes on to say, "The time of new leadership will arise, and has come, Megatron. You have led us to fall on the back foot, and that under my leadership, I will lead us to a better future." Most of the cons do not move at these words. However, Dragship and Dead End walk to him and say that they are with Starscream, and how under him on Cybertron, he treated them much better than Megatron ever has as a leader, and that Starscream is right about Megatron losing it of late. Then, Breakdown joins them, with Knockout following suit. Breakdown says that Megatron left him to die by the humans, and he remembers a time when they were in the mines, and how Megatron saved him from being killed. He fought for him. That was the Megatron he fought for back in the day, but now the Megatron he is now is not the same bot he would ever follow. Knockout says, though, he follows Breakdown. Megatron calls them traitors, but when he fires at them, Knockout activates the force field generator and uses it to push them all back towards the front of the ship. Then Starscream orders for them to retreat, with his team escaping just barely, flying right off the Nemesis. Luckily, it was flying over the ocean, so they managed to land in the water. Well, besides Starscream, who just flies away. Megatron is very much not happy with this, with Droidwing saying that they will give chase, but he says it's a waste of energy, and that in time they will deal with them. So, he has Soundwave work to block them all out of access on the ship, and continue to decode the Icon relics with Skywarp. Starscream's crew asks where they will be going, since they don't have anywhere in mind, but Starscream says he does have it figured out, and they arrive at the location where he has left his ship from Cybertron. But when they point out that it can't fly, and thus their location will be found out soon by the cons, Starscream reveals he actually has a surprise, as he has another core generator that he kept hidden for emergencies like this. So, they begin repairing it, and putting it back up into the ship. But Starscream also reveals that he does have something, a backup of the Iacon files that he has implanted, and that he implanted a virus to the Nemesis to give them a backdoor access to the ship. Thus, once Soundwave has decrypted the next coordinates, they can follow soon after, with his team smiling as they feel like they have a chance to win, actually. Sometime later, Skywarp and Slipstream are walking around the ship, with them talking about what's been happening lately. But Slipstream point out that it feels like every Seeker eventually leaves and goes on their own, and she's worried that there may not be lots of Seekers left in the universe now. Skywarp says that all who leave didn't deserve to be with them, and that they are better off without them, but Slipstream sees there's something he's hiding, and so she drills him to tell her. Eventually, Skywarp says that he's just angry about what Thundercracker, his brother, how he could just leave the Decepticons, and how he could just throw everything away they had for those worthless Autobots, and that the cycles they spent as a unit, as brothers, mean nothing to them. Slipstream is shocked by this, but she says that cons, I guess, change, and that he made his choices, and now they'll have to suffer it. She puts a hand on his shoulder and says that if he needs someone to talk to, she can talk to him. But Skywarp pulls away and says he'll be fine. He doesn't need anyone's help. She accepts this and says that when the time comes to face Thundercracker, will he be ready? Skywarp pauses and thinks before he says he'll be ready to do what he must for Lord Megatron. A few days later, Bulkhead is on recon when he eventually finds and then falls into an energon mine and eventually finds himself on the Nemesis. He would begin sneaking around until he finds a computer and tries to send a signal and tries to send an SOS, but ends up setting off the alarm on the ship, and soon he would run into Slipstream, who begins to fight him. Bulkhead, he may be larger and stronger, but he is too big to really fight that well in the corridors, so he is eventually taken down, heavily injured. However, Arachnid would get the signal, so she awakens the rest of the hive and sends them to the Nemesis, with Hardshell leading the attack. Team Prime detects the hive, so all forces go to intervene, with every Autobot besides Ratchet and Perceptor arriving. RC sees Arachnid and still goes after her, while Arachnid sends some members of the hive to deal with the bots. Bulkhead is being dragged through the ship's hallways when everybody starts to hear the Insecticons arriving, so all the cons go to deal with them. Slipstream has a few of the heavier cons still drag Bulkhead out, but he does actually take the advantage to take down the guards, and he actually manages to get away. Megatron and the rest of his forces head through and start to fight through the bugs. Slipstream Dreadwing start pulling their weight as the new commanders of the Seekers, with them actually fighting off pretty well against a lot of them. Skywarp uses his cloak to get a few good shots on them, and the rest of the cons do some pretty good attacks on them. Hardshell then lands, and so him and Megatron begin to fight, with them clashing. However, Megatron still has the advantage of being a seasonal warrior and having more intelligence. RC and Arachnid still fight the same, with it resulting in Arachnid being trapped in one of the pods. At that moment, Hardshell is about to do a heavy strike on Megs when he begins to break free of Arachnid's control, with the rest of the Insecticons stopping, as they all pledge loyalty to Megs, which Megatron is very satisfied by. Now he has reinforcements after so many of his soldiers have abandoned him or died. Slipstream is a bit wary of the Insecticons, but she accepts their loyalty to Megatron. Bulkhead would still enter the field core of the ship and take it down, making his escape as the ship goes down. With him arriving at base, and that all goes the same. Megatron sees that the ship is too far damaged to begin flying again, with Slipstream pointing out that soon an attack will happen, and that they must prepare to take flight again. And that should they just abandon the Nemesis to find somewhere else. But Megatron says that is a preposterous idea, but he does have a plan, as he brings out some of their supply of Dark Energon, and he uses it to reactivate the ship, with it seemingly going well, as he doesn't have any worries. However, some of the other cons are a bit wary given the Nemesis's history of its creation. Optimus decides to use the Spark Extractor to finish the war off, so him and the rest of the bots arrive, with Ratchet and Grimlock staying behind. When they arrive to take down the ship, they watch it take off again, as it then looks to them and they try to get to it. However, it activates immobilizing guns and begins shooting at them, freezing them, ending in basically the same events, except there's more characters here. However, when Megs tries to order the ship to go to them, it starts to take off to another direction. Megs is questioning what is happening, with some of the Vehicons trying to figure out, but they would still get shocked. Slipstream and Skywarp start to realize what might be happening. However, their worries are proven to be true, as then a voice is heard talking from the Nemesis, with it being the voice of Trypticon. Now that he is back online, he doesn't listen to Megatron because of Megatron using Trypticon's body as a nemesis and not even trying to revive him, and how he would have rather died than become this husk of his former self. Megatron tries to order him, but Trypticon begins taking his vengeance, freezing some of the Decepticons. Megatron tries to shut off the core, but he would be frozen the same, with every other con frozen as well, with nobody being able to escape Trypticon's wrath. Trypticon begins then decoding the Iacon files in hopes that one of them can maybe, just maybe, fix his body and bring him back to his true form, as if these are weapons of the Prime, some of these. It may be his only hope. On the Ark, Grimlock does at first want to storm the ship, but he begins to think about what might happen if he does, but he does get an idea, as the Trypticon did not seem to go after Fowler when he was there, so he asks the humans to head to the ship. Ratchet is a bit against the idea, but the humans do agree, with Grimlock saying that they only have one chance, and to be careful. So, they head in. The humans get on board, with it pretty much all going the same, with Ratchet getting the idea to download the Iacon files that have to be decoded, so they put the flash drive in before heading deeper into the ship. With it all going the same, with them eventually turning off Trypticon. Trypticon swears vengeance and that he will return one day and get his body back as he shuts down. The humans quickly make their escape, but instead of Ratchet, it's Grimlock that goes onto the ship and grabs the drive, knocking some of the Vehicons that were trying to attack the humans away as they make their escape. With Megatron again once furious, but glad the ship is at least back up in the air. Optimus begins looking over the new downloaded Iacon files and begins to realize that they need to go after all of these at once. They cannot spare anyone, so he says that he will be splitting the bots up into 4 teams to go after each of the relics, and wishes them all luck. The cons see the 4 relics that have been decoded, and so Megatron orders the same thing, with the race for the 4 Iacon relics beginning. And that is where we're going to leave things for right now. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in part 9.